Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining me here for tonight's event. My name is Rui Costa, and I'm the Director and CEO of the Zuckerman Mind, Brain, and Behavior Institute. It's a pleasure to have you here at this Stavros Niarchos Foundation Brain Insight Lecture. At the Zuckerman Institute, we are committed not only to understand how the brain works, but also to disseminate and bring to the public the latest findings in an accessible but engaging language. So we hope that tonight's presentation on the science and the real-life applications of brain-machine interfaces sparks in you this curiosity, the same that we have when we study the brain. We'd like to thank the Stavros Niarchos Foundation and many foundation members that join us here tonight for their continued partnership and commitment to helping us make this science accessible. Tonight, you'll be treated to two individual presentations from two incredible speakers, but these will be moderated by an amazing young scientist from the Zuckerman Institute, Dr. Karen Schroeder. Karen did her bachelor's in biomedical engineering and neuroscience at Duke University, and then she went to University of Michigan, where she did a PhD in biomedical engineering, and then she joined the Zuckerman Mind, Brain, and Behavior Institute, where she's a postdoctoral researcher in Mark Churchland's lab. So her own work focuses on the development of brain-computer interfaces for movement planning and control, with the hopes that one day even people that are unable to move can do so just with neural activity, with a thought. So she studies the statistical structure of the activity in the cortex, especially the motor cortex that's responsible for our movements. And then using those statistics, she builds brain-machine interfaces, neural interfaces with much higher performance and reliability across a broad of movement types. She's also very involved with the community. She's the co-organizer of Neural Launchpad, an online talk series for graduate students and postdocs in neuroscience. And she has one of these amazing grants from the Brain Initiative that will lead her to her own path. And so we hope that very soon she's going to start her own laboratory at another university or close by, who knows. So I hope you have a lot of questions during today's session. Thank you for those that sent some questions in advance, but please engage and put your questions that come during the talk in your queue and in the Q&A box. So now I'd like to turn it over to Karen to welcome Karen here, and she's gonna lead the whole session. Karen, thank you so much for doing this, and please take it away.
Of course, thank you so much, Rui, for the introduction. And it's my great pleasure to introduce this virtual event. So I'll say a little bit about brain-machine interfaces. Brain-machine interfaces, or brain-computer interfaces, are electronic devices that provide a direct connection between the human brain and the external world. Brain-computer interfaces hold this huge promise to improve life for people with sensory or movement impairments, and maybe for more of us in the general population in the future. And to me, they're also one of the most fascinating frontiers in science because they represent entirely new ways, new modalities for people to interact with the world. As Rui mentioned, I am currently a researcher at Columbia in this field. I'm working on my own small sort of part of this pursuit, which is BCIs to restore movement. And I became interested in BCIs as a student in high school and then in college. And over the years, it's been really amazing for me to see the field developing and capturing the interest and imagination of the public more and more. So I'm really happy that we're here together today and about to hear from our speakers about two sides of brain-computer interfaces. So one side is what's the science behind them? What's the state of the art? And the other side, how do they affect those who use them? And after we hear from our two speakers, we're going to chat a bit about what's next for BCIs. So today we'll be hearing from Dr. Nima Mesgarani and Nathan Copeland. These are two experts who have very different experiences in the world of BCIs. Nima Mesgarani's research focuses on understanding how the brain processes what we hear and using that knowledge to engineer brain-controlled hearing devices. Nathan Copeland's experience is as a pioneering research study participant who has been a part of BCI studies through the University of Pittsburgh in human clinical trials for the past 6 years. And he knows firsthand the challenges and also the promises of these devices. So we're going to hear two 15-minute talks, one from each speaker. And then I'll moderate a discussion where we'll take questions from you, people in our audience. Thank you if you've already submitted a question, but if you haven't, please do. While the talks are in progress, you can use the Q&A button to submit a question and let us know if you are a teacher or student also. And if you are a student, please tell us what grade you're in. So it's now my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Nima Mesgarani. He's an associate professor at the Zuckerman Mind-Brain Behavior Institute at Columbia. He received his PhD from the University of Maryland and was a postdoc at the Center for Language and Speech Processing at Johns Hopkins University and the Neurosurgery Department at University of California, San Francisco. He received the NSF Early Career Award in 2015, Pew Scholar for Innovative Biomedical Research Award in 2016, and the Auditory Neuroscience Young Investigator Award in 2019. And his research has been selected among the top 10 innovations of the year by UNICEF, top 10 breakthroughs by Institute of Physics, and top 10 health innovations by Healthcare Innovation. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Nima Mesgarani to the stage.
All right, thank you very much. Let me go ahead and share my slides. All right, is everything okay with the slides?
Yes.
All right. All right. Well, thank you very much, Karen. I'm very excited to have this opportunity to tell you all a little bit about the state of brain-computer interfaces and more specifically about some of the work that we do in our group. So as Karen mentioned, brain-computer interfaces are built on this notion that anything that we think, feel, sense, or do is basically boils down to activity of the neurons in our brain. So then is it possible to directly tap into that activity and read that information directly from the brain, or write new information into the brain? And this sort of technology, this sort of methods can be used to for example, replace a function, restore, enhance, supplement, or improve. So this is an area that has been very active, and in the past decade almost has gone through some really breakthrough advances. And I'm going to start by just giving you a sense of where this field is now and what are some of the new things that has happened, particularly in the past decade. So one of the first things is the control of a prosthetic arm. And that is something that we're going to hear in the second part of tonight from Nathan. So this has been one area of research that has received a lot of attention. Here you see a patient that was implanted on both sides and is able to control 2 robotic arms simultaneously to perform some complex tasks. This could be done also non-invasively, for example, from a bracelet that records the activity in the muscles. For example, for an amputee. And as you can tell here, after some practice, it's possible, for these people learn how to control the robotic arms really well. It can be, used to, for example, control virtual objects. And in one of the earlier work that was a breakthrough in this field, people have used, electrical activity, neural recordings in the brain of a monkey to not only control an avatar, but also fill virtual objects in that virtual world. And I'm sure many of you have seen this recent video from the Neuralink. So this is the company that Elon Musk started in 2017. That what you see here is a monkey that is able to play video games. And what is really interesting in this case is that unlike the previous cases, there are no cables, there is no device. Everything is now integrated. This sort of, reading information from the activity of the muscles, the electrical activity in the muscles can also be used using a wristband, like what you see here, to control virtual objects. So this is an example from a company called Control Lab that is now part of Facebook, which is now Meta. And you can imagine that this sort of technology can be soon used to control objects in a virtual reality space. Now, so this is not only to control, let's say, a movement on an arm, but it can also be used for, for example, messaging and surfing the web. So what you see here are two people who who are able to use this sort of devices and these sort of decodings to send messages, surf the web. Another recent advance has come from trying to decode letters, right? So as you imagine writing a letter from the activity of the neurons in the motor cortex, it is possible to decode what the intended letter was. And what was remarkable about this work that just came out very recently is really the speed, which is 90 characters per minute. And if you want to have a sense, Stephen Hawking was able to write 1 or 2 words per minute with with the device that he was using, and the speed that the person types on a cell phone is around 180. So this is already half of that, which is really great. Here is another example where researchers, instead of looking at the hand activity, motor cortex, they try to decode words directly from the speech cortex. So this is the person also that is trying to, to try to say something, and then from the activity in the speech cortex, they're able to decode some of the words. All right, so this sort of brain-computer interfaces can also be used to restore sensory functions. One of them, which is, which has been around for a while now, is a visual prosthesis. That you can have a camera that sends information either to the retina or directly to the motor cortex and can restore function to a person who is unable to see. Cochlear implants are probably the most widely used BCI applications that can stimulate the neurons in the cochlear directly for somebody who has lost hair cells. And using that kind of method, they can restore also hearing to somebody who is unable to hear. And finally, one example that I want to mention, which is actually not very new, it's pretty old, but this was I think this was one of the first examples of direct brain-to-brain interface. So what you see here, these two mice, one of them is seeing a visual cue, and the other one is pressing a lever. And the one that is pressing the lever doesn't see the visual cue. The one that sees the visual cue doesn't have access to the lever. But when their brains are synced, they are able to, to solve this problem together, and both of them are getting food. So this is nice, and if you want to think of the possible futuristic applications of this sort of brain-to-brain interfaces, maybe one day, instead of sending a text to someone, you can send them a thought directly. All right, so now let's talk a little bit more specifically about what we do in our group, which is specifically about speech. So speech communication involves, whenever we have something that we want to tell to another person, we have, we produce a pattern of electrical activity that then moves the muscles in our vocal tract, and that movement produces a vibration in the air that when it travels and reaches a person's eardrum, it causes a vibration of the eardrum, and that movement is then translated to electrical activity and is interpreted by their brain, and they suddenly know what you wanted to tell, who you are, how you're feeling. All of that information can be directly estimated from the sound. Now, this obviously is, could be effortless for many people, but a lot of people are suffering from having disabling hearing loss. The chart that you see here shows the projected number of people with disabling hearing loss. And as you can tell, pretty soon it's going to reach 1 billion. And even now, 1 in 8 people in US have hearing loss, and that raises to 50%. So 1 in 2 in those who are 75 and older. So this is a problem that is going to affect a lot of people, and that's why we are focused on this problem. All right, so here is a very quick summary of what goes on in the brain as we listen to speech. These are the parts of the brain that are involved. From the ear, you have the cochlear that does time frequency analysis, and from there, the signal travels through multiple stops until it reaches the auditory cortex, which is this area right behind your ear. And from there are some other places that are involved. We know, especially because of people who have lost function in some of their brain, and from the kind of deficits that they have, we know something about what sort of areas are involved. Exactly how, it's more unclear. We don't know that as much yet. All right, so if you want to study the system, obviously we have to have a way to record from these areas. And the methods that we use in our lab, one of them is invasive recordings. So these are done in collaboration with the hospitals here at Columbia and other places in New York. And these are the patients that are undergoing epilepsy surgery. And as part of their clinical care, they are implanted with these sort of invasive electrodes, which are placed in order to figure out the locus of the epilepsy. But while they are in the hospital and they're connected to a computer, we can go and ask them to participate in our projects, and we can then record from their brain. And with these two methods, the surface electrodes, ECOG, and with these sort of depth electrodes, we are able to access both the primary parts and the secondary parts of the auditory cortex. So let's see what kind of activity do we expect to see as a person is listening to speech. So here's one case. And what you see here is each of those dots represents one electrode. And what you see here, the color change is the change in the voltage as the person is listening to speech. So there's a lot of information there. And one of the scientific goals that we and many others are pursuing is to basically figure out what in the signal, what kind of sounds when are heard are causing this sort of pattern. Why do we have this sort of a spatiotemporal pattern of activity in the brain? And when we talk about the speech communication, what you might consider is something like this, like you're sitting in a nice, quiet place, having a conversation with a friend. But obviously, especially for those of us who live in New York, that is really not the case. And this is more of the scenario that we are faced with every day. So as you're having a conversation with a friend, cars are passing by, you have maybe planes, other people who are around you are speaking at the same time. And, especially in New York, this is a big problem, right? If you look at the noise map in New York City, you can easily see that there is pretty much nowhere that you can find to have a quiet conversation with someone. So we constantly are, surrounded by all these sort of sounds, all these sort of irrelevant noises that we have to filter out. And in our scientific work, one of the things that we have shown is that our brain is able to adapt very quickly whenever the noise changes. So if you're talking to a friend, you're walking from the street to a bar, for example, or a restaurant, as soon as the background changes, it's going to come in and flood your system. And then very quickly you adapt to it. And then you go back to as if it wasn't even present. For many of us, it's a simple thing. But if, for anybody who has a hearing loss, this is already a difficult problem. So one of the goals that we have is to figure out if there is a way to enhance hearing particularly in background noise. And I wanted to tell you about one case that we had a patient with this sort of depth electrodes. And surprisingly, we discovered that whenever we are stimulating, we are sending electricity to the electrodes that are in a particular part of the brain called the planum temporale. This patient responded that the background noise disappears and all I hear is the voices. And I wanted you to hear that from her own mouth. Let me just play this video.
Okay, now I'm going to count to 10. And just tell me when you feel a change and what it sounds like. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
5. Oh, it's getting stronger.
What did you feel?
I can hear your voice more and more clear.
You use some other description. She's NPO right now, so I don't want you to talk too much because I don't want your mouth to get too dry, but you described it. What's the best way you can describe this in 10 words or less? When
you're listening to music and you're trying to adjust the equalizer, the tone, how you hear the music, easiest way to explain it.
Oh, wow. Would you describe it?
Yeah. So, and this was, something that we also systematically tested. So we gave her a lot of speech in noise materials, and I asked her to report the quality and also the intelligibility by repeating them with and without the stimulation. And we confirmed that it was significantly improved. Like the intelligibility goes from 50% when she was able to hear half of the words to almost 100%. So this is really interesting, and and if you remember the picture that I showed you, this sort of neural activity as we are listening to sound and speech. One question that you might ask, which then connects this to the whole world of brain-computer interfaces, is how much can we say by looking at this activity about what the person actually heard or wanted to hear? And like, is it, for example, possible to do a decoding and map it back to the sound that the person heard? And if that works, it could be, of course, useful for people who are unable to speak, if we can decode their speech directly from their brain. And it also could have applications for people who use hearing aids. One of the problems with the hearing aids currently is that anybody who has them doesn't really use them when they really need them. Because if they go to a crowded place, they amplify everybody, and that doesn't really help the person. So to look at the first problem, how much can we say about what the person heard without knowing what they heard? The easiest thing you can do is to record the neural activity and then find some kind of a relationship between the neural activity and the sound. And if you have a model of that relationship, then we can reconstruct a sound for a new sample. And let me play you an example of what is possible, which was, the first one is based on, a work that I did when I was a graduate student almost a decade ago, more than a decade ago. It probably wasn't very intelligible. And now, with our recent work, when we use more advanced models, this is what we get.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Yeah, so I hope you could tell that these were the digits, and it's much more intelligible now. And one question that you might ask is, but what if you have multiple people talking? And if you reconstruct from someone's head, someone's neural activity, do you see both of the talkers, or do you only see the person that you're attending to, you're focusing on? And if you change your focus, is that going to change? And that's exactly the question that we investigated in a scientific study that, we had people listening to talkers alone, and we get, we reconstruct these images from their brain. And when they are listening to the mixed audio, but attending to one at the same time, we only see that talker as if the other speaker is filtered. Now, this could be interesting, right? Like, imagine that you might be in a party and maybe you are paying attention to one person, and this research shows that your brain waves are going up and down, are following with the voice of that person. But if you suddenly start to listen to another conversation, then your brain waves are going to switch and then follow the voice of that other talker. And and if a person has a hearing aid in an environment like this, that is not going to be useful, right? Because there is nothing that the hearing aid can do on other than amplifying everybody without knowing which person you want to listen to and which people you want to eliminate. So that's exactly the idea of this sort of brain control hearing device, that you have a system that automatically separates all the sounds, compares them to the brain, and then chooses the one that is most similar to the brain wave. And by amplifying that person, then it can help the person to hear. Now, you might think that the brain part is a very difficult part of this issue, but it turns out that solving that engineering problem is also extremely difficult. And that is an area that we focused a lot in the past few years, and we've been able to solve this problem by finding better representations of audio that have separation of the talkers. Now, having that, then we can have this sort of idea that you have, imagine a box that we call it AAD, Auditory Attention Decoder, which has two inputs. One of them is the sound in the environment, and the other one is the brainwave of a listener. And inside of this box, it automatically separates the voices, compares them to the brain, and amplifies the one that is most similar to the brainwave of a listener. And I'm going to show you a demo of this system. This is a system that the first part, the listener is trying to focus on the male talker, and that switches to the female. And we turn on the system at 10 seconds, and the switch happens around 25.
How to be a shepherd. Being a shepherd can be a lot of fun, especially when you know how to do it. Shepherds can be found all over the world, any place from the deserts of Israel to the highlands of Scotland.
The breed of a
Find a good
dog
place
can
to
have
live.
significant impact on its
Many shepherds
personality,
like to live in mountains.
as well as its size,
If you want
health,
to do this,
and
it
required
would be best to
maintenance.
move to Wales or
For
Scotland.
example,
If you
long-haired
want to live in
breeds,
the United
like
States,
collies,
move
may
to
be
Idaho
beautiful,
or
but they
Wyoming.
require frequent
Buy
brushing.
a sheepdog.
If you do not have time
Some
to devote to
sheepdogs are better
weekly
than
or even
others.
daily maintenance,
You would do
you may
best to
need
look on a
choose
dog
different
market
breed.
online or see
The
if you can
American
find a breeder.
Eskimo is
All right, yeah, so I hope you could tell that it was much easier to listen to the attended talker when the other person is attenuated. So basically, let me just wrap up by, that sort of brain control interface technologies are already around. They are used to repair, restore, and enhance sensory, motor, and cognitive functions. And this sort of brain control hearing devices, they are potentially able to edit the acoustic scene for you, right? So they can eliminate the sources of sound that you don't want and just keep the ones that you want to listen to, which could be extremely useful in noise. I want to just emphasize that this sort of research really requires a multidisciplinary approach, which combines the neuroscience, engineering, and computing sciences, which is really the essence of the Zuckerman Institute and the institute that hosts us. And I just want to acknowledge all the lab members and our funding sources, and I'll be happy to take questions in the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nima. Remember, if you do have a question, please use the Q&A button to submit it and we'll answer them after the second talk. So it now gives me great pleasure to introduce our second speaker, Nathan Copeland. In 2004, Nathan was just 18 years old when a serious car accident left him with quadriplegia. The lack of mobility caused by this made life more difficult and often left him feeling like he would no longer be able to accomplish much with his life. But years later, he was presented with the opportunity to help shape future technologies that could eventually benefit people in similar situations. When he learned that this opportunity involved being a participant in a research study, he knew he couldn't refuse. And for the last 6 years, Nathan has participated in a BCI study through the University of Pittsburgh. Using microelectrode arrays implanted in his motor cortex, he's able to control a robotic arm. Additionally, Nathan was the first human implanted with microelectrode arrays in somatosensory cortex, which can be stimulated to provide sensation back from the robotic arm. While his time with the research study is finite, Nathan has built up a wealth of experience that will stick with him for the rest of his life, from meeting President Barack Obama to giving presentations in Japan. And he hopes to continue sharing this story and insights into using implanted BCI with the world. Please join me in welcoming Nathan Copeland to the stage.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. like mentioned, my name is Nathan Copeland, and in 2004, I was in a car accident that left me a C5 quadriplegic. While I was in the rehab hospital, they asked if I wanted to be listed on a research registry where doctors could find participants that qualify for the studies they were looking to do. And, I thought, you never know what's gonna come up in the future. So I said, yeah. And, I kind of forgot about it for a few years. And it's been around 7 years now that I got involved with a BCI study at the University of Pittsburgh, where I have 4 BlackRock Utah microelectrode arrays implanted on my brain. They are a 10 by 10 grid of these little spikes. Each spike is an electrode that's able to record a single neuron, and that's kind of what they look like, little squiggles if you've never seen them. And then so I have 2 of those in motor cortex that allow me to control things like a robotic arm and computer cursor. And I am also the first human in the world to have implants in sensory cortex, where using intracortical microstimulation, they can kind of, just send a little bit of stimulation directly into my brain that will elicit a sensation that feels like it's coming from my own hand. Recording from all these neurons allows the computer to make a decoder that basically, I think a direction while the computer's showing me a visual of a hand going in that direction, and I just kind of think along with it, and it makes a decoder that basically figures out my intentions. And then this kind of control is what we are able to accomplish. But one of the biggest questions that I always get asked is, where do I feel sensations and what do they feel like? And before I actually started the study, I'd been told by more than a few researchers that they were really looking forward to what I had to say, since only monkeys had this kind of stuff implanted before, and they're not very good at talking or letting you know these things. So this picture is a representation of where the sensory electrodes are implanted in relation to the central sulcus or brain. And then each of these colored squares is one of the electrodes, and on the hand is a corresponding area that I feel a sensation when they stimulate on that electrode. And so you see most of the sensations I feel are at the base of my fingers, and then I do get some that are my index knuckle. And then the real can of worm questions is, what does it feel like? So the sensations that I feel, that they do feel like they're coming from my own hand, and they don't feel completely natural, like they don't have a one-to-one real world analog that I can compare them to. But Usually it's a pressure or tingle. There's some that feel warm. Some feel like a tapping. And so where on my hand the sensation feels like is electrode dependent, but by changing some of the stimulation parameters, like changing from 100 hertz to 20 hertz, can change the sensation that I feel. And then, so hooking this stimulation up to the robotic hand completes a bidirectional computer interface where sensors on the hand, in this case we use torque sensors in the fingers, let the computer know that the hand has made contact with an object, and then depending on the values of those torque sensors, the computer will send stimulation to an electrode that we'd already determined felt like the corresponding finger that was being touched on the robotic hand. And that basically let me feel like I was touching the object. And like I said before, while those sensations weren't completely comparable to a real world sensation, like if a ball, it didn't really feel exactly the same. But just getting any feedback to go along with my visual feedback, we found really helped improve my performance of tasks where I was picking an object up and placing it on a box. And basically this is a video showing the fastest time that I've completed these objects with and without stimulation. And basically when I don't have stimulation, I look at the object and I see that the hand has made contact with it, but sometimes I would go to pick it up and it would fall out, or you know, I didn't have that reassurance that the hand was making a good grasp on the object, and so I would spend extra time trying to make sure that I had that good contact. And then with feedback, along with the visual feedback, the sensory feedback allowed me to just realize and have that assurance that I was making good contact with the object. And then I just moved on to picking it up and putting it on the box. And then in 2016, the White House Frontiers Conference was in Pittsburgh, and I went into the lab one day. I usually go 3 days a week for about 4 hours for testing. But I just went in on this random day and they asked if I wanted to meet the president. I said, yeah, like I couldn't imagine why I would say no. And so a few months later, I got to meet President Obama and shake his hand with a robot and fist bump it. And for a long time, I thought that would be the easiest thing I ever got to do with the robotic arm or quality study. But then in 2018, I got to fulfill my life dream of going to Japan. Everyone knew I really wanted to do that. I've always been into anime and sci-fi, and that's actually, you know, one of the reasons I'm so interested in the BCI study. I just thought it was, you know, really cool, and there was a conference in Japan, and I got to use it as basically an excuse to get to go to Japan for 2 weeks, and I did a presentation there, and I did a presentation at a couple universities, and that has now been the coolest thing I've ever done involving BCI. One of the things I wanted to do since the beginning was play video games with BCI. It was something I was always interested in before my accident, and after 5 years of asking, I was finally able to play Final Fantasy 14 with my implants, and we made a video of it. And you know, last time I checked, there was like 230,000 views or something of this on my YouTube channel that I put it on, and I wasn't that great at playing with it, but it was just pretty awesome to get to play it. And
Hello, everyone. Sorry, we're having a moment of technical difficulty. We're going to try to get Nathan back here. In the meantime, I see a lot of very nice questions coming in through the chat box. So thank you for those. We'll be right back. So while we are waiting for Nathan's internet problem to be fixed, I'd like to invite Nima back on stage with me, and we can take some of the questions from the audience that were directed to him.
Hello.
Hello. All right, we have a lot of interesting questions. So the first one that I wanted to ask you was, what inspired you to start your research? How did you get started in this field?
Oh, yeah, well, I've always been interested in speech and audio, and I think it might go back to my grandparents who had hearing impairment. So I was always interested in this problem. And I started as just a pure hardcore engineer, and I was just working on speech technologies, things like Siri, Google Voice. But back in the days when I was a graduate student, these technologies were horrible. Like nobody was using them. They didn't really exist, and and everybody who was working on them was really frustrated because nothing was working. And then we had this wonderful example, the brain, that was doing a great job. So that inspired me also to move a little bit towards the brain and learn about the brain and to see if there are ideas that we can use to make these technologies better. And that's how I've been going back and forth, and now I have a mixed sort of training in both neuroscience and engineering of audio, and it's been a really rewarding journey.
So another question. Oh, we have Nathan back.
So this was probably the most bad luck I've had in a while. I just went to the doctor's today, and I have a broken leg, and then now this happens. My desktop computer crashes twice in a row, and now I am on my laptop. Let's see if I can share my screen and try and continue.
So sorry to hear about your leg. I appreciate your swift laptop action there.
Happens. I don't need surgery or anything, so that's good news. I just have to wear a brace for a while. Okay, can you guys see this again?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I got to play a video game. That was pretty cool. Okay, so my implant, this set of implants was actually done on May 4th, Star Wars Day. So a few years ago, everyone in the lab are and I just came in that day, and someone had brought lightsabers. I still am not clear who that was, but we just decided that this was probably the best way to celebrate. I also really like this video because the arm that I'm using in this video is actually the second robotic arm I've gone to use, and that's the Luke arm by Deca. The black one from before was the modular prosthetic limb made by APL. Let's see. This is just showing some control using that arm. This is one of the objects in that same ARAT test that I showed before. This is actually the hardest thing. Those marbles are meant to represent water, and water and robots, dumping and splashing all over the place is not the best idea. So we went with marbles. And so besides those two arms, I've actually I think I have a good chance that I can say no one has controlled more things using a BCI than I have. The top left here is a bare arm. I've used a Princilia hand. I've actually got to use Gloria exoskeleton glove. I used that for a while, and I got to eat a a taco with that. Now currently I'm using the KUKA LBR assembly robot. This picture has the right hand robotics reflex tactile gripper, but just recently I've gotten to use a different hand on it that is an anatomical hand. This is actually my favorite robot that I've been able to control, specifically because it is not anatomical. All the extra joints allow it to work within the workspace a lot easier with limitations like the other arms that are mounted at the shoulder do, just because you know it's being an actual arm, it's limited in the direction and way that it can move within the workspace. This picture is all of the stuff that is required to run these BCIs, and it's just one of the big reasons that not everyone just has these at their house anymore. Like, there's a whole rack of computers and specialized equipment, and then there's even more specific equipment for doing the microstimulation, and it's just a lot of stuff, and you need people to run it all. And then a few years ago I started using this portable tablet version that basically condenses all that other stuff into a box and a medical grade tablet. It uses these Seraplex E's, which are now Neuroplex, instead of the big patient cables. Those just screw onto the pedestals, and you can use it's a micro HDMI cable. And while the tablet is, I'm usually generous when I just say not powerful, it's really limited CPU wise and that kind of stuff of what it can do. But basically I can use it to control, to make a cursor decoder that I can use to either emulate a mouse or keyboard presses, which at home lets me do things like play video games, which I really like doing. I have some of these on my YouTube channel, and one day I hope to put some more out and maybe stream playing, or just someone somehow gets me a PS5, maybe control one of those with my brain. But so the tablet can actually connect over the network to my desktop computer, which right now is not doing too well. But then that allows me to control the cursor and keyboard on that computer, which can run much more demanding games and programs. So the other thing I really like to do with this system at home is draw, using basic painting programs. This is, of course, my favorite meal at Taco Bell, cheesy gordita crunch and a Baja Blast. And then just here's some of my other art that I've drawn. I'm really hoping to soon expand on the art that I'm doing, and we're trying to get together like a gallery and stuff where it can be shown and maybe toured around. And this is my masterpiece so far of making a calico cat. Okay, so technical and engineering challenges with these BCIs still. Wired connections, that's something that is already getting phased out. There's a number of new devices that are wireless, but right now for things like stimulation, I think you still need to be hooked up to some specialized equipment with wires. Getting all of that equipment down into a reasonable size box, especially if you want to consider it to be portable, is an issue that's still being worked on. The personnel that is needed to run these, I have the tablet at home, and I can run that independently, which is a touchpad, because everything's pretty simple. But if you were going to have a robotic arm somewhere, like attached to your chair or in your house, it might be more complicated right now than someone could do independently. Decoder retraining. Every day that I use the system, I need to retrain a decoder because signals in your brain kind of shift, and what I think was moving to the right one day might be down and to the right the next day. So then if you try to use that decoder from another day, things are just off. They don't work. They're not stable for a long-term use. Robot reliability, that's always my number one disappointment with BCI is robots break, and then it's something that you couldn't deal with on your own if one of these systems was at your house or being used independently. There's also no that I know of current robot arms or devices like that are even developed that could work in a house. Like that KUKA is huge, and it would just never work in my house, and I could not use it attached to my chair to open doors when I'm going around or anything like that. So here's social media. I got my email is bcicandobetter@gmail. If you ever have any questions or want me to speak somewhere, you can just shoot me an email. I do have a collection of these videos on my YouTube under a playlist called My Cyborg Adventure. I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter. Sorry for the crashes and then the now rushing, but yeah, thanks for sticking around and listening to me ramble on. Just one of the things that I still want to get across is when I joined this study, I knew it wasn't going to have direct benefits to me. It's not designed to restore any of my function or sensation, but I did it really to help push the science forward. So, future generations that have accidents like mine or, illnesses that, leave them feeling like they won't be able to accomplish anything or, pursue the things they loved to do, like, games or painting or whatever that is. I just want to help get that all that science moving forward so that those generations kind of don't have to go through that period of despair or depression, and they can just kind of, have some options.
Thank you so much, Nathan. That was amazing and highly enjoyable.
Yeah, sorry about the technical difficulties.
No problem. So I'd like to bring Nima back on also. Oh, okay, here we are. All right, so I think we have time for a few questions. Something that's come up several times in the question box is, people are excited about these technologies. They want to know when they will be more widely available. And also they want, it's interesting to hear from both of you, maybe what you think the largest roadblocks are to the technology being disseminated and available. Maybe Nima, if you want to start.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, of course, this question of timing is the million-dollar question that we all like to know. I can say, the obstacles that are still unresolved. Probably one of the biggest ones is to have, the ability to have these sort of devices being able to, for chronic long-term implants without any safety concerns, without any difficulty, and that is a very difficult problem to solve. And I'm pretty optimistic because now there are some commercial players are looking into this very actively. This requires a team of mechanical engineers, biomedical engineers, device engineers, biocompatible sort of devices, and to neurosurgeons, to people who know how to safely implant these sort of devices. And I think the sensor part is one of the biggest problems that, if we have an integrated device that can be safely implanted, that would, give us suddenly access to the sort of signals that then can be used. For this sort of hearing devices that I talked about, we also have some engineering problems on the acoustic, on just the sound processing part that need to be resolved. For example, for the device that I mentioned, to be able to separate out the sources, all the sounds in the environment, in a noisy place, in a place that has a lot of echo. When you have, like in a restaurant, you might have 10 people talking at the same time. So to solve this algorithmically also, to be able to extract one of them out of all the mixed audio is a very difficult and challenging problem, which has seen great progress in the past few years. And that's also still something that has to be resolved. And finally, there are some scientific things that we have to address. For example, what happens if we put a person in a closed loop? If they are unable to follow a speaker to begin with, how much signal, how much signature of the attention can be picked from the brain to amplify the source? And we are doing some research in that area and we see some very promising results. Like it seems like even if a talker is just 20%, 30% intelligible, that seems to be enough for us to decode this, the focus of attention from the brain and then amplify the talker to help the person. And if I were to put a time on it, I would probably say, I think in the next 5 years or so, there would be some good progress.
Nathan, do you have thoughts from the motor side?
Yeah, so I would definitely agree with Nima on safety and durability of these devices is, one of the big issues. So when I started the study, it was actually for, it was a 1-year study. And then after the year, they submit stuff to the FDA and go, okay, it's still working. Let's extend it. And then, it got to 5 years and I hit the 5-year mark, and now 10 years. And I wish I could say it works as well as it did in the first year, but signal quality, everyone knew it was going to go down, and it's just one of those things that, no one knows how much and how fast. And I don't have actual data because I'm just the guinea pig, but I'm sure they have figures written down of, how many percent it's gone down, but it's definitely something that is noticeable, but it is still working, and I will use it until it breaks. But it's one of those things that, for it to get out to more people, at some point someone has to say that it's good enough. And from my perspective of a user, I think it's good enough depending on what you want to do with it. Someone with even less function than me, or like locked in, someone that would really just enjoy to draw and play a simple game, or browse the internet or something like that on their own, regardless of actually controlling a robotic arm or not, just that much alone that is possible independently now. I think for that person it is good enough. But it's one of those things, like, no one knows how long these arrays are going to last. They have data from monkeys, and monkeys do stuff like rub poop on their heads and bang their stuff around. So that I would expect that in humans it would last longer, but there's stuff like infections that you can get, and they will cause this device to need removed. And it's just one of those things of someone saying it's good enough, and it moving from this thing where you have to be around the right research institute and have the right condition and the right life circumstances to be able to join a study like this. Once it gets moved into that area where insurance can get billed for it, because people cannot afford this kind of stuff. But so I think it's coming. I don't know how soon, but some of it is good enough, some of it's not, and it really depends on what you're trying to get out of it.
What is it like for you as a participant to feel things going very slowly, given that you put so many hours of your own time into it, or when things, don't succeed in an experiment, for example?
I mean, it's one of those things that it feels like everything is slow, but then I look back and it's been 7 years since I, got involved with the team and all that. And things have definitely changed and improved. And like I knew when I joined the study, I was at the very forefront. There was no one that had done it before me. So I knew the things aren't going to always go right. And then, I'm a very patient person, and I don't get upset easily. So when I'm at the lab and an experiment just doesn't work for whatever reason, or equipment failure, or the code has a mistyped thing somewhere, and they can't figure it out, I just sit there and watch YouTube and listen, and if I can add something to help, I do. But it's one of those things that I see the progress, and I realize it's been a while, but also it's been the blink of an eye. So,
Nima, I'd like to ask you, what happens if you're in a situation where maybe the part of cortex that you want to work with is damaged? Like maybe the person had a stroke in the auditory cortex or speech processing area. What can you do? Can you leverage plasticity in the brain and sort of use territory from some other area to interface with?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. It is a little bit outside of my area of expertise. But you know, as you mentioned, the research shows that the brain has this remarkable ability to rewire itself. So, you know, if there is a part that is not being used by, you know, what it was supposed to do, then it would be taken over by other senses to, you know, to be used for other things. And, you know, and that also is something that we see with people, for example, who have stroke. You know, many of them may have speech deficits following the procedure, but then after a while, like after a year or two, you know, some of their, you know, speech abilities is recovered just because the brain, you know, finds a way to rewire things or to use, you know, some redundancy, you know, to recover as much function as possible. But you know, for some things, like for example, if the auditory cortex, this sort of signals that you're looking for example, to decode the attention of a person or the to focus of the hearing, that has to reach the cortex. So you know, for somebody, for example, who is, you know, has a hearing loss at the lower level, for example, in the auditory nerve or hearing, you know, hair cells, then that requires alternative ways of getting at this sort of question.
Something a bit related to that, someone had an interesting idea in the questions. Can you filter your auditory signals for emotion or sentiment instead of for intended speaker? Do you have, they say that, you know, maybe when anger sentiment is detected, you could take some action like mute those sounds. They propose that could be a good tool for training nonviolent communication.
Oh, well, that is a very interesting idea. You know, what I say that is that definitely the emotion can be detected from the brain. Like if you're looking at, you know, the activity in the auditory cortex, because you know the emotions in speech and you know overall in audio, there's a lot of similarities also with music. A lot of the ways that we convey emotions are by using acoustic cues. Right, for example, if you're happy, we speak fast. If you're sad, we speak slowly and we drop our pitch. So that information is certainly in the brain. It can be detected. In terms of what to do with it, that's a different question. But you know what, I can say that it can be detected and an action can be taken based on that.
Okay, I think we have time for one more quick question. Nathan, what future capabilities are you now hoping for now that you have achieved Final Fantasy?
Well, since I wasn't very good, I would hope that maybe one day I'll try again. Really, if I could have anything I wanted right now, I would definitely go wireless bilateral implants and you know, a PS5 or a new Xbox or a new computer that doesn't crash all the time, and just really attempt to play any game I could. I enjoy doing things just because they haven't been done and it's possible. So lots of games I would try.
Thank you. I believe that's all the time we have. So thanks to everyone in the audience for their attendance. Thanks to Nima and Nathan for joining us. If you're in the audience, please take 2 minutes to fill out the survey that we will put in the chat and let us know what you thought about the event. And we appreciate all feedback that you have for us.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Nima. And thank you, Nathan, for this wonderful conversation. Thank you for those of you that stuck with us and until the end. And we hope you will join us on Wednesday, February 22nd, for our next event in the series, where Dr. Nikos Krigas-Korte and Dr. Amanda Pingbody-Baki will discuss the science around visual and sensory perception. Again, I hope you continue to stay healthy, and I look forward to seeing you in the new year. Good night.